Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominion's Fist Asterisk, watching the blue-green marble of Earth grow larger in the viewscreen. 300 warships of the Galactic Coalition hung in perfect formation behind him, their hulls gleaming with the promise of swift victory. This was supposed to be the easiest conquest in the Coalition's thousand-year history. The humans had no shields, no energy weapons, no faster-than-light travel. Intelligence reports showed they were still using chemical propulsion and primitive nuclear fission. Their most advanced military technology barely qualified as spacefaring, consisting of crude orbital platforms and asteroid mining stations. It would be like crushing insects beneath a boot. "Admiral, we're receiving multiple transmissions from the planet," reported Lieutenant Zarn, his crystalline features reflecting the bridge lights. "They appear to be surrender offers." Kethvar's four arms crossed in satisfaction, even better than expected. The humans had seen their fleet and immediately understood the futility of resistance. Put one through. The viewscreen flickered, showing a middle-aged human female in what appeared to be formal diplomatic attire. Her face was pale but composed, and when she spoke, her voice carried an odd mixture of fear and determination. "This is Secretary General Chen of the United Earth Government. We know why you're here. Our deep space observatories detected your fleet 3 days ago. We have no weapons that can harm you, no defenses that can stop you. We surrender unconditionally and request only that civilian populations be spared." Kethvar allowed himself a rare smile. The Coalition had spent months preparing for this invasion, mobilizing their finest forces from across 12 species. All that preparation for a species that gave up before the first shot was fired. "Transmission acknowledged. Prepare for planetary occupation." But as the feed continued, something nagged at him. The human's expression wasn't quite right. There was resignation there, yes, but also something else. Something that reminded him uncomfortably of the look his own father had worn during the siege of Kethter Prime, when the old warrior had smiled grimly and told young Kethvar that sometimes the greatest victory required the greatest sacrifice. "Admiral," Zarn interrupted his thoughts, "the advanced scouts are reporting something unusual. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter shows signs of recent large-scale mining operations. Massive ones. Our geological surveys from 6 months ago showed minimal extraction activity." "Irrelevant," Kethvar dismissed. "Desperate extraction efforts to build defenses they don't have the technology to construct. Begin the assault. Send the Vanguard fleet to secure the orbital installations." The first wave of Coalition ships broke formation, sleek vessels designed for swift strikes against defended positions. They accelerated toward Earth's orbital infrastructure, weapons powered and ready to neutralize any resistance. Kethvar watched with professional interest as they approached the largest human space station. Then the human installations simply disappeared. Not destroyed by weapons fire, not evacuated. They vanished in brilliant flashes of light, taking entire sections of the Vanguard fleet with them. The explosions were unlike anything in Kethvar's experience, each one releasing energy equivalent to a stellar core collapse contained in a few kilometers of space. "What was that?" he barked. "Report." "Unknown, sir. The humans detonated their own installations. Energy readings are impossible." Each explosion measured 3.7 times 10 to the 14th joules. Kethvar's blood chilled. Those were antimatter detonations, pure antimatter. The humans had just casually sacrificed their own infrastructure, using antimatter charges as sacrificial weapons. But that was impossible. Antimatter production and containment required technology centuries beyond human capability. "Sir," Zarn's voice was tight with barely controlled panic, "we're receiving another transmission from the surface." Secretary General Chen appeared again, but now her expression was clearly readable. It wasn't resignation or determination, it was pity. "Admiral Kethvar," she began, and his spine went rigid at hearing his name. "I apologize for the deception. We are not defenseless. We simply have no weapons designed to attack others. Everything we've built over the past 3 years has been designed for one purpose: to ensure that if someone forced us to fight, the cost of victory would be higher than anyone could bear to pay." The viewscreen shifted, showing Earth from orbit, but now Kethvar could see what his sensors had missed before. The planet's surface was crisscrossed with geometric patterns too regular to be natural, too vast to be anything but continental engineering projects. You see, Admiral, when we discovered we weren't alone in the universe, we asked ourselves a simple question. How do you defend paradise when you're too weak to fight? Chen smiled sadly. The answer is, you make paradise too expensive to take. Admiral Kethvar stared at the readouts flooding his screens. What he had initially dismissed as primitive mining operations now revealed themselves as something far more sinister. The geometric patterns on Earth's surface weren't cities or agricultural zones. They were carefully positioned antimatter production facilities, each one connected by underground transit systems that spanned continents. How much antimatter are we looking at? He asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. Chief Science Officer Mordek, a being whose species had mastered physics for millennia, worked frantically at his console. His normally steady tentacles trembled as he processed the readings. Sir, based on the energy signatures from those orbital detonations and extrapolating from the surface installations, conservative estimates suggest they've produced enough antimatter to. He paused, recalibrating his instruments twice before continuing. To destroy their own planet 17 times over, and that's just what we can detect from orbit. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. 300 ships, the finest fleet the Coalition had ever assembled, against a species that had turned their entire world into a weapon capable of sterilizing itself and everything in the surrounding space. Secretary General Chen's image remained on screen, and she seemed to read their thoughts. You're wondering how we accomplished this so quickly. The answer is simple. We cheated. While you and the rest of the galaxy spent centuries perfecting weapons to kill each other, we spent them learning to build. When your scout ships arrived 3 years ago, we had a choice: surrender our freedom or find another way. The view screen split, showing massive underground complexes that stretched like neural networks beneath Earth's crust. Humans moved through them in organized streams, not fleeing in panic, but conducting what appeared to be routine operations. We studied every species in your coalition through the data your scouts inadvertently transmitted. We learned that you all think in terms of assets and losses, conquest and surrender. But humans think differently. When we realized we couldn't build weapons fast enough to match you, we built something else instead. Kethvar found his voice. This is madness. You're threatening to commit planetary suicide. Chen's expression didn't change. No, Admiral, suicide implies desperation. This is a calculated business decision. You want Earth because it's beautiful, resource-rich, and populated by beings you can enslave. Remove any one of those factors, and your cost-benefit analysis changes dramatically. A new voice interrupted from the communications station. Admiral, we're receiving tactical data from our deep-range sensors. The humans have launched something from the dark side of their moon. The image shifted to show a stream of objects leaving lunar facilities. They moved slowly by galactic standards, but Kethvar's trained eye recognized efficient orbital mechanics when he saw them. Whatever they were positioning themselves throughout the solar system. Automated antimatter delivery systems, Chen explained conversationally. We've spent 3 years building them and placing them at strategic points throughout our star system. If Earth is destroyed, they'll ensure the destruction extends to any hostile forces within a radius of, well, let's call it locally significant. Mordek's voice cracked as he spoke. Admiral, those aren't just delivery systems. Based on their trajectory and energy signatures they're positioning themselves to collapse the local star. The revelation hit Kethvar like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just weaponized their planet. They'd weaponized their entire solar system. If threatened, they would trigger a chain reaction that would turn their star into a bomb, creating a nova that would sterilize everything within dozens of light years. You're talking about destroying innocent worlds, Kethvar said. Billions of civilians throughout nearby systems. Chen nodded gravely. Yes, and that decision weighs heavily on us. But you presented us with an impossible choice. Accept slavery or accept responsibility for the deaths our freedom might cause. We chose freedom. The moral weight of the consequences will fall on those who force the choice. A tactical officer called out urgent readings. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the system. Whatever they're planning to do, it's already beginning. The bridge lights flickered as the ship's sensors strained to process the data. Throughout the solar system, human installations were coming online in sequence, each one adding to a growing energy signature that defied every principle of safe engineering practice. Chen continued as if discussing the weather. Our scientists estimate you have approximately 47 minutes to completely withdraw your fleet beyond the edge of our star system before our defensive measures reach the point of no return. After that, the process becomes automatic. No human intervention can stop it. This is terrorism, Kethvar growled. This is mathematics, Chen replied. Your coalition has conquered 47 worlds in the past century. Each time you calculated that the benefits of conquest outweighed the costs of war. Today, we're simply adjusting your equation. The cost of conquering Earth is now the destruction of this entire stellar region and the collapse of your invasion fleet. The benefit remains one habitable world with a subjugated population. She leaned forward slightly. We invite you to recalculate. Kethvar looked around his bridge. His officers, drawn from the finest military traditions of a dozen species, stared back with expressions ranging from disbelief to growing horror. They had come here expecting easy victory against a primitive species. Instead, they faced beings who had turned the concept of defense into something nightmarish. The humans weren't warriors. They were engineers who had calculated that the only way to preserve their freedom was to make their conquest too expensive for anyone to afford. And in 46 minutes and counting, they would prove their point by burning down everything within 20 light-years to ensure their independence. The coalition fleet hung motionless in space, 300 warships suddenly rendered useless by an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. Admiral Kethvar felt sweat forming beneath his environmental suit as he watched the countdown displays his tactical team had hastily constructed. 41 minutes until the human stellar collapse protocol reached the point of no return. Sir, Lieutenant Zarn reported, his crystalline structure flickering with stress patterns. We're receiving communications from the other fleet commanders. They're requesting immediate orders. Kethvar could imagine the chaos erupting across his fleet. Captains who had spent their careers mastering the art of space combat now faced an enemy that had turned warfare into a mathematical proof. The humans had weaponized not just their planet, but the fundamental forces of their star system. Admiral, Secretary General Chen's voice continued from the main screen, you appear to be deliberating. Please understand that this is not a negotiation. Our stellar destabilization sequence is automated and irreversible once triggered. Your presence here merely provides the trigger condition. She gestured to something off-screen, and new data flowed across their displays. These are the technical specifications for our nova-inducing technology. Your scientists are welcome to verify our calculations. You'll find that we've been quite conservative in our estimates. Chief Science Officer Mordek had been frantically analyzing the human data since it arrived. His tentacles moved in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. Admiral, their technology, it's not supposed to be possible. They're using antimatter as a mere catalyst for something far more sophisticated. They've found a way to destabilize the quantum vacuum itself. The implications hit Kethvar like a meteor strike. The humans hadn't just built weapons. They had discovered principles of physics that the Coalition's greatest minds hadn't even theorized, and they had done it in 3 years. How, he demanded. Chen seemed to hear his question through the open channel. You want to know how a primitive species achieved in 3 years what your advanced civilizations never discovered in millennia? The answer lies in something your coalition has forgotten, the power of having nothing left to lose. The screen split again, showing images of human cities, but now Kethvar could see them properly. What he had taken for normal urban development was actually a carefully orchestrated transformation. Every building, every street, every infrastructure element had been rebuilt with a single purpose in mind. When your scouts first arrived, they transmitted their survey data back to your space. We intercepted and decrypted those transmissions. We learned about your coalition, your history of conquest, your technological capabilities. We realized we had perhaps 3 years before you returned in force. Chen walked across what appeared to be a command center, passing displays that showed human activity across the globe. We also realized we had advantages you had never encountered. You've spent centuries fighting species at roughly equivalent technological levels. You've never had to conquer a civilization of engineers who were completely dedicated to a single problem. What problem? Kethvar found himself asking. How to make conquest impossible, Chen replied simply. Not through military victory, but through ensuring that conquest becomes meaningless. Your coalition conquers worlds to gain their resources and populations. We've engineered a scenario where attempting to conquer Earth destroys everything within 20 light-years, including your fleet and several of your colony worlds. The tactical displays showed the inexorable progression of the human systems coming online. 36 minutes remaining. Across the solar system, the automated antimatter deployment systems had reached their positions. Deep beneath Earth's surface, massive reactors were building toward critical states. On the Moon, in the asteroid belt, throughout the orbital zones, human installations hummed with barely contained energy. "Sir," Mordek's voice carried a tone of reluctant admiration, "I've completed my analysis of their stellar destabilization technology. It's elegant, terrifyingly elegant. They're not trying to make their star go supernova through brute force. They've found a way to trigger a quantum cascade that will cause the star to consume itself from the inside out." Kethvar stared at his science officer, meaning the energy release will be far greater than a natural supernova, and faster. Instead of taking minutes or hours, the process will complete in seconds. Nothing within 25 light-years will survive. The bridge crew exchanged glances of mounting horror. They had come to conquer a world. Instead, they had stumbled into a trap that would destroy everything they had sworn to protect. Chen's voice continued, calm and professional. "We understand this seems extreme, but consider your own history, Admiral. How many species chose extinction rather than slavery? How many civilizations destroyed themselves rather than surrender to your coalition? The only difference is that we've found a way to ensure our destroyers share our fate." A communications officer called out urgently. "Admiral, we're receiving priority transmissions from Coalition Command. They've detected the energy buildups and are demanding an immediate report." Kethvar closed his eyes. Coalition Command was 50 light-years away. They would expect him to complete the conquest and return with a new slave world added to their empire. How could he explain that the species he had come to conquer had turned conquest itself into a weapon? 33 minutes, Admiral," Chen observed. "I should mention that our calculations included the possibility that you might attempt to withdraw your fleet and then return with automated weapons designed to trigger our defense systems from outside the destruction radius. Our stellar collapse is designed to activate if any artificial object larger than 10 meters approaches within a light-year of our system after the withdrawal deadline passes." The trap was perfect, complete and perfect. The humans had engineered a scenario where the only way to conquer Earth was to accept the destruction of multiple coalition worlds and the fleet itself. And the only way to avoid that destruction was to abandon the conquest entirely and never return. They had turned their weakness into ultimate strength by making their very existence too dangerous for anyone to threaten. Admiral Kethvar found himself in the most impossible situation of his military career. Behind him, 300 ships filled with the finest warriors from 12 species awaited orders. Before him, a species that had transformed the very concept of warfare into something unrecognizable. And beneath it all, a countdown that measured the destruction of everything he had sworn to protect. 28 minutes. "Sir," Zarn reported, his crystalline form now showing stress fractures, "Captain Velter of the 3rd Battle Group is requesting permission to begin emergency withdrawal. Several of his officers have calculated the blast radius and they're concerned about their home colonies." Kethvar understood their fear. The Velnari homeworld was only 18 light-years away. If the humans carried out their threat, an entire civilization would die not in battle, but as collateral damage in a war they never chose to fight. "Admiral," Chen's voice drew his attention back to the main screen, "I can see you're struggling with this decision. Perhaps it would help to understand why we chose this path." The display changed, showing historical footage of coalition conquests. World after world falling to superior technology and organization. Populations enslaved, resources stripped, cultures destroyed. The efficient, methodical expansion of galactic civilization through force. "Your coalition has conquered 47 worlds," Chen continued. "Each time the native populations faced the same choice, submit or be destroyed, most submitted. A few chose destruction, but in every case the coalition's costs were minimal compared to their gains." The footage shifted to show coalition worlds, prosperous and peaceful, built on the labor and resources of conquered peoples. The mathematics of empire laid bare in images of wealth and comfort purchased with others' freedom. "We studied your methods extensively. You're not evil, Admiral, you're efficient. You've created a system where conquest is simply good business. Low risk, high reward, sustainable growth, the perfect predatory model. Kethvar found himself nodding despite his anger. The coalition had indeed perfected the art of profitable conquest. They took only worlds that could be easily subdued, enslaved only populations that could be efficiently managed, and expanded only when the benefits clearly outweighed the costs. "But your model has a flaw," Chen said, and now her voice carried a note of something that might have been satisfaction. "It only works when the prey behaves predictably, when they either submit or resist conventionally. You've never encountered a species that chose to break the game itself." 24 minutes. "Ma'am," Kethvar said formally, "you're describing the destruction of billions of innocent beings, civilians who have never harmed your world or threatened your people. How do you justify such massive casualties?" Chen's expression grew somber. "The same way your coalition justifies enslaving billions to maintain your empire. The same way your fleet commanders justify turning free peoples into property to serve your expansion. We've simply changed the equation." She gestured to displays showing coalition territory. "Your empire stretches across 300 systems, Admiral. It feeds itself by consuming the freedom of others. Today, we're presenting you with a choice. Lose one target world or lose significant portions of your empire to preserve the right to continue enslaving others." The moral complexity of the situation hit Kethvar like a physical blow. The humans were right about the coalition's methods. They were right about the mathematics of empire. But they were talking about genocide on an unprecedented scale to make their point. "Sir," Mordek called urgently, "I'm detecting quantum fluctuations near the human star. Their stellar destabilization process has begun at the most basic level. We're approaching the point where withdrawal becomes irrelevant." 21 minutes. "Admiral," came a transmission from Captain Korzeth of the Heavy Assault Division. "My homeworld is 19 light years from here. I have family there. Orders, sir." The question hung in the bridge air like poison. Kethvar could order the fleet to continue the attack, knowing they would die along with several coalition worlds to prove that the humans' threat was real. He could order withdrawal and return to face coalition command with news that a primitive species had successfully defied the greatest fleet ever assembled. Or he could try to find a third option. "Secretary General Chen," he said formally, "I request permission to establish direct communication with your leadership. Admiral to civilian authority." Chen nodded. "You're speaking to the highest authority on Earth, Admiral. Our government was reorganized 3 years ago when we committed to this course of action. I have absolute authority to make decisions regarding our planetary defense." "Then I'm requesting a modification of your terms. A face-to-face meeting. 1 ship, diplomatic flags, safe conduct guaranteed." For the first time, Chen's expression showed uncertainty. "Admiral, our stellar destabilization sequence cannot be halted once it reaches critical state. In 19 minutes, that point will be reached regardless of any diplomatic agreements." "I understand. But before my civilization faces the choice between withdrawal and mutual destruction, I need to look into the eyes of the person making this decision. I need to understand who you really are." Chen was quiet for several seconds, consulting displays outside the transmission range. When she spoke again, her voice carried a note of curiosity. "Very well, Admiral. You may transport to the surface, but understand that nothing you say or do will change our commitment to this course of action. We've passed the point where compromise is possible." Kethvar looked around his bridge one final time. His officers, his crew, the finest military professionals from across the galaxy, all looking to him for answers he didn't have. Behind them, 300 ships hung in space, waiting for orders that could determine the fate of multiple civilizations. "Zarn, you have the bridge. If I'm not back in 18 minutes, order the fleet to withdraw to minimum safe distance." "Sir," Zarn's voice cracked, "what if the humans are bluffing?" Kethvar studied the tactical displays showing energy buildups throughout the solar system, the impossible technology readings, the countdown that marked potential stellar collapse. "Look at the data, Lieutenant. Does this look like a bluff?" As he headed for the transport bay, Kethvar realized he was about to meet the most dangerous enemy the Coalition had ever faced, a species that had made peace with its own destruction to ensure its freedom. // The transport beam deposited Admiral Kethvar in what appeared to be an ordinary government building. No guards, no weapons, No signs of the massive planetary defense system that held his fleet hostage. Just a simple conference room with windows overlooking a city that seemed remarkably calm for a civilization on the brink of self-immolation. Secretary General Chen was waiting for him, looking exactly as she had on the view screen. Middle-aged, professional, carrying herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had made peace with the consequences of her decisions. She gestured to a chair across from her own. 17 minutes, Admiral. You wanted to look into my eyes. Here they are. Kethvar studied her face as he sat down. He had interrogated prisoners from dozens of species, could read the subtle signs of deception, fear, and hidden weakness. But Chen's expression showed only a calm certainty that was somehow more terrifying than any threat. "Who are you?" he asked. "Not your title. Who are you to make a decision that will kill billions?" Chen smiled sadly. "I'm an engineer, Admiral. Before the crisis committee was formed, I designed water treatment systems. Nothing dramatic. I spent my career figuring out how to provide clean water to people who needed it." The revelation struck him as absurd. "An engineer? You're threatening to destroy star systems, and you're an engineer." "The best qualification for this job, actually. Engineers deal with reality. We solve problems within the constraints we're given. When your scouts arrived, we were given an impossible problem. How do you defend a civilization that can't win a war?" She stood and walked to the window. Outside, Kethvar could see the geometric patterns he had noticed from orbit. Up close, they were clearly massive construction projects that had transformed the planet's infrastructure. "We considered conventional military development, crash programs to build weapons and defenses. But our scientists calculated that even with unlimited resources, we couldn't reach military parity with your coalition in less than 50 years. You are coming back in 3. Chen turned back to face him. "So we asked a different question, not how to win a war, but how to make war impossible. How to create a situation where conquest becomes self-defeating." 15 minutes. "You're talking about the murder of innocents," Kethvar pressed. "Civilians who never threatened you." "Yes," Chen agreed simply. "And that weighs on all of us. But let me ask you something, Admiral. In your 47 conquered worlds, how many children grew up as slaves? How many families were separated? How many cultures were destroyed to build your empire?" The question hit harder than Kethvar expected. He had always thought in terms of military objectives and strategic necessities. The human costs of conquest had been statistics in reports, not faces with names and dreams. "The difference," Chen continued, "is that your victims died slowly over generations as their spirits were crushed and their heritage was erased. We're offering a faster death in exchange for our freedom. There has to be another way." Chen shook her head. "Admiral, your coalition exists because conquest is profitable. Every world you've taken has made you stronger, richer, more capable of taking the next one. We've simply altered the profit equation. Taking Earth now costs you more than leaving us alone is worth." She activated a display showing coalition territory. "Your empire controls 300 systems. Losing the 6 or 7 worlds within our blast radius would reduce your territory by perhaps 3%. Gaining Earth would increase it by less than 1%. Even from a purely military perspective, this is a bad trade." 12 minutes. Kethvar found himself grappling with the cold mathematics of empire. Chen was right. The coalition could absorb the loss of several frontier worlds more easily than they could accept the precedent of a successful defiance of conquest. "But if we withdraw," he said, "word will spread. Other species will try to copy your methods." "Exactly." Chen's smile was genuinely warm for the first time. "That's the real victory, Admiral. Not just our freedom, but proof that freedom is possible. We've shown that a sufficiently motivated civilization can make conquest too expensive to attempt." She gestured toward the window again. "Do you know what we've built here? Not just weapons. We've created the most comprehensive planetary engineering project in recorded history. Every human being on this world has spent 3 years learning to work together toward a common goal. We've become something new. A species that chooses mutual destruction over slavery. A species that refuses to accept false choices," Chen corrected. "Your coalition presented us with submission or destruction. We created a third option, costly independence. The freedom to determine our own fate, purchased with a price so high that no rational aggressor would be willing to pay it." 9 minutes. Kethvar felt the weight of decision crushing down on him. His fleet was the finest force the coalition had ever assembled. His officers had trained their entire lives for this moment. His civilization had invested centuries in building the infrastructure of conquest. And a species of engineers had made all of it irrelevant in 3 years. "Admiral," Chen said softly, "you came here to look into my eyes. What do you see?" Kethvar studied her face one final time. No madness, no desperation, no bluff or deception, just the calm certainty of someone who had calculated the price of freedom and found it acceptable. "I see someone who means exactly what she says," he admitted. "Then you understand. In 6 minutes, our stellar destabilization reaches the point of no return. After that, the mathematics take over. Physics doesn't care about politics or military pride or the righteous anger of conquerors. It simply follows the laws we've arranged for it to follow." Kethvar activated his communicator. "Admiral to Fleet Command, order all ships to withdraw immediately to minimum safe distance. Emergency burn, maximum velocity." "Sir," Zarn's voice crackled through the device, "are we abandoning the mission?" Kethvar looked at Chen, who nodded respectfully. "We're accepting reality, Lieutenant. The conquest of Earth is no longer strategically viable. Relay withdrawal orders to all ships immediately." As reports flowed in of the fleet beginning its emergency withdrawal, Chen walked him to the transport area. "Admiral, one final thing. When you report to your coalition command, please be precise about what you found here. We're not a military threat to anyone who leaves us alone. But we've proven that sufficiently motivated civilizations can defend themselves in ways your strategists have never considered." The transport beam began to energize around him. As the room faded, Kethvar heard Chen's final words. "Tell them that humanity has learned the most important lesson in the galaxy. The price of freedom is always negotiable, but the value of freedom is not." When he materialized on his flagship, the bridge crew looked at him with expressions of confusion and relief. Through the view screen, they could see the coalition fleet streaming away from Earth at maximum velocity, 300 ships in full retreat from a species that had never fired a shot. "Orders, sir?" Zarn asked. Kethvar looked back at the blue-green world falling away behind them, where an entire civilization had just redefined the rules of galactic warfare through the simple expedient of making conquest too expensive to afford. "Set course for home," he said quietly, "and prepare a full report for Coalition Command. They need to understand what we've just encountered." Behind them, Earth's star continued to burn peacefully, its planned destruction canceled by the simple fact that sometimes the greatest victory is achieved by being too dangerous to defeat.